Welcome to part 4 on the Junkyard V8, and I was going to stop at part 3 after we tested it, but I had some problems, and that is that in terms of trying to tune up the Holly and all that sort of stuff, I've given it a nice big rev because it was idling a little bit funny, ended up developing a huge knock, so I've done some damage. Now, engine reconditioning shops will always tell you should machine the deck of an engine you're reconditioning, because for the last 40 years it could have a bit of warpage or whatever in it. I find it doesn't matter because it does work either way to hold your tea. Now, I want to talk about this junkyard engine. There's a lot to get through with this chapter because I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to do any more on the junkyard engines. In fact, after the third one I marked it as final, and that's it, done and dusted. Now I have decided to unpack this a whole lot more, pull it apart, have a look, and I've got a purpose for it now. So junkyard engines, I'm no stranger to them. I've had quite a few in the past and I've used them in my capacity as a school teacher, as a teaching tool. And of course we'll go through a bit of that. I've got some photographs and that sort of stuff, and I can't show a lot of it because it's got students' photographs, that sort of thing in it. And of course they're all in their 20s now and I've got no way of contacting them to get permission. But I can show you the sorts of things that I've been doing. But hope you enjoy this. Stick around, there's going to be a few more chapters on this. I can't do any more on the XC at the moment because I'm waiting for the engine block to come back for it and all the parts, because I'm about to start rebuilding that. That's a 351 engine, this is a 302, but I think we'll stroke this. I think we'll do something with it. That's if we can use the block, and you need to watch this to see if we can. So, hope you enjoy. Any questions or comments, please leave behind and I will endeavour to answer them as soon as I can. So for year 11 and 12 vet classes, there's a series of competencies they need to attain before they get the award, if you know what I mean. And so generally that's just small bits and pieces that are completed in terms of prac exercises that are marked off. Now I wanted to go more the project-based learning route, if you know what I mean. And so I figured if I got a car and we built a car up, it would be more interesting for the students and more engaging. So of course I found this one in some long grass, as you can see here, in Pakenham. So I paid the seller, I think it was $100, and got a car trailer, hitched it up to the back of the old EL and brought it into work, and of course it didn't look very attractive when it got there. So on entering the workshop and the kids came in, they took one look at it and looked at me, and I did give them the opportunity to comment, and I said, here it is with some wheels on it. Who thinks we'll be getting this going and driving it by the end of the year? And of course no one put their hand up. No one thought we could do it, but it ended up being a really good project, and of course here it is here as well, as we were sort of cleaning it up. And there's the frame coming up now, here it is here, after it's been all, so there's a lot of wire brushing and sort of rattle can painting to get it all looking good, and we started painting suspension bits because that's what the kids wanted to do. So they started really taking ownership and enjoying it, and of course there were modules such as brakes and all sorts of things that had to be met to meet the competencies. And of course we went off to Burson's and bought all the relative parts, and new discs there and brake pads, and overhauled the brake master, what do you call them, calipers, that sort of thing. Here we go. Someone suggested a red differential, so we painted it red. This is a Holden 1 ton, I don't know if I mentioned it before. They had to wire it as well, and of course there it is, there is a sort of a rolling chassis with some 12 slotters on it that I picked up from a bloke, I think it was in Doveton, they were on eBay. Now the first junkyard engine was this 202, which was under a friend's tree and he donated to the school, so we just ran some rings and bearings through it, or at least I did that part of it, and some gaskets, and gave it a nice rattle can finish of Chevy orange. So that was maxed at 60 thousandths too, that 202, it was pretty good. And it ended up being very powerful in that little frame. Got myself an HJ Premier front, we put that on, and the idea of this was to have a good driving car with all subsystems visible, so that anyone looking at it could see precisely how the whole car worked, and that included brakes, steering, suspension, absolutely everything. And it wound up being a really successful project, and that was the first year I ran the project based learning like that in this fashion, and it was good. It ended up being a tremendous asset to the kids. So the following year I found another 1 ton of frame and brought it into work. Enter the Junkyard V8s. Now there were two of them. There was an XB 302 and an XC 302, which, I mean, these days I would have restored them, I suppose, but back then they weren't worth anything. I think the XC was $100 and the XB was about $500. But anyway, I did manage to get myself a 253 V8 out of a VH Commodore, I think it was, and brought it into work, and of course then found out, I bought it from a wrecker, then found out that it had ingested water and there was rust in one of the boards. So I got hold of the wrecker and asked for another one. He had another one there, and I went to return this and he said, you know what, keep it, it doesn't matter, pull it apart and let the kids see how it all works. Here's your replacement engine. So we pulled this one apart here that you see photographed and put rings and bearings through it again, gasket's head, and gave it a lovely new Holden Blue Motor paint job and put it into a car. Now I had a really crazy idea that maybe it would benefit from doing something a little bit different to what we did with the other one tonner. So we didn't have a front on it, we mounted it in this other frame. You can see that's a little bit different. I think that fuel tank's out of a Mazda 121 or something. We never had petrol in that place. And you can see here it's starting to look very tidy, and we've robbed the 12 slotters off the other car. The other car you can't see there, it's still in the workshop. And of course this was a different group of kids, so again we had to wire it up, we had to put brakes into it, we had to do all sorts of stuff. It's got some bald Mickey Thompsons on the back, obviously burnout tyres from a previous owner. And I've always had a fondness for the Holden V8s, but one wasn't enough, so I got that second one and put two in it. And you can see it's a bit cobbled together because we were running out of time. This was a year-long project, and there it is there with some EA seats, which were, I don't know how much they were nothing, and an EA steering column, and it really was sort of cobbled together. But most of the time that year was spent on the engineering of joining the two engines up to run in unison, and of course it had two separate starter motors, that sort of thing in it, which were wired up in parallel, so they both happened at the same time, and it was coupled with a small bit of universal, with a small bit of tail shaft and uni joints and some flanges I had made up at an engineering place. I did have big plans for this car, in that the following year I wanted to finesse it a bit more, and you can see it hasn't got radiator hoses going to the rear engine. That was done with exhaust tube, and the two radiators were ganged in front of one another, so it doesn't look very satisfactory. We did run out of time, but we did drive it around the quadrangle, or at least I did, and had something of a ball with it. It was a gnarly piece of work, that car, and it sounded like thunder when it was starting up. One of the other teachers didn't enjoy it too much. But I wanted to fabricate my own set of headers for it, so it looked like it was a V16, and also fabricate some sheet metal rocker covers to run right down the length of the engine and hide the coupling a bit more with some other covers, so it really did look not like two V8s but a V16. Of course it was a potent bit of work with two 4-barrel Rochester quadrajets, 8.4 litres and 16 cylinders. That thing was a beast. Well, I didn't think I'd be filming this in any great hurry. I've actually started it again a couple of times in an effort to tune up the Holly a little bit better, but in doing that I've given it a rather large rev. I think it peaked at about 4,500. It's developed quite a nasty knock in the bottom of it, which is no big deal, but I think it's pretty well munted. So I'm going to take this off the stand and pull the pan off and have a bit of a look, maybe take the heads off. Just want to see what's there and what's going on, because I need to find out if this block is rebuildable, because I wanted to use one of them in the XD. So I'll take this off now and take a bit of a look. And so I'm not looking at it as a bad thing, I'm looking at it as a good thing, because engines are far more fun to do than anything else, I reckon, in cars. Or at least that's what my trade sort of is. It's more engine related than body and all that sort of thing. But not just that. This is going to let me sort of take the pan off, take the heads off, have a look, see if it's been bored. I'm tipping it has been. I'd be very, very lucky indeed to get another block as good as the one I had, or as good as the other one I've got. And I want to use, I need a socket set. I need to use one of them in the XD. So, I just want to see what I've got, what's sort of here, and what I can use, so to speak. So, I'm sort of quite excited about it, just to have a look and just a bit of a sticky beak, see what's going on. But there's the cat's on the roof, I think. There's a puss on the roof. So I'm curious. I'm expecting this thing to be toast inside. I really am. But the thing that got me about the knock was it didn't have it before, and I didn't rev it hard. I mean, it's probably approaching its red line, but that in itself can be problematic because there's no load on it. So any weak parts, there could be a negative harmonic there, and any sort of weak parts are going to show up very quickly. So in hindsight, it's good that it didn't go straight into a car, which I was considering while I rebuilt the XD's engine. I was thinking of putting this straight in. Now if I can find a bit of money, which I'm not hinging any hope on, because my wonderful wife is very understanding with the cars, but I don't think she's going to be too understanding if I have two engines on the boil. But if I can find some money, then I can get them done concurrently, but I'm certainly not holding my breath with that. I don't think I'm going to be able to, but at least, look, it's worth having a bit of a look anyway. So this is just explorative sort of work, but whatever the case, the first thing we need to do before absolutely anything, before we get the block crack tested or anything, once we strip it down, if it looks to be a rebuildable core, we need to get a PPSR check, personal property securities register, just to make sure it's not stolen. We've got to run that number. So if it's hot, of course we do our money. It's not worth worrying about, but that's the first thing we need to do to make sure it's all good legally. Don't forget, of course, that the engine number and VIN on a Ford is the same, so if anything's amiss, it's going to show up as being bad. So I'm going to take the manifold off. Have a bit of a sticky in here to see what's going on. There we go. Come to mama. There we go. That'll lift off. Oh gosh. Maybe stick my fingers in there and lift him up and away. Now I'm going to use these exhaust manifolds on the 351 when I run the cam in, because I want to sort of media blast them, or media blast the other ones I've got, sorry, and paint them with a cast iron paint. I don't want them getting too hot straight off the bat. They've sort of got to warm them up gently to let the paint bake on, and that way it'll be a more reliable coating. But that feels a bit stiff. But I'm going to do it that way. I think one of these has a small crack in it. I've got some spares. Oh shit. These are very tight. And also I'm just going to chuck all these in because I'm going to get another load of electroplating done. So I can sort of get all that done at the same time. Well, I think we're ready to start lifting. Cool. Don't need to hit the radiator. I always get nervous when they sag and they've got so much weight on them. But now, it's time for surgery. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is check out the cylinder bores, and even though it's an old junker and it's not worth much, it still doesn't hurt to take the heads off, or at least to disassemble it the proper way. So we're loosening around like that and then going into the centre. And it's really hard to get them off or loosen them. So, oh gee whiz, those little guys are tight. There's one in here. Let's see if I can get under here. Oh, wow. Oh, I feel like I've just been to the gym. I'll take them all out, see what lies beneath. Now I've loosened them all off except the centre one. Well, I've loosened that, but it's still threaded. I'll still sort of half in, so I can just break the seal on the head without the risk of dropping it. Whew. And we'll see how we go. Okay, so that's going to give up quite easily. It's already sort of broken its seal. And I'm really hoping that this little guy is a rebuildable, whoops, not there, is a rebuildable core. Because it would be rather good. Alright, we'll take that one out. I might move the camera actually because oh crap, that was good. Alright, let's have a bit of a look. Well, the heads, the exhaust valves are sunk in a little bit, which is what I sort of assumed before. That one's not so bad, but this could have been on gas or something. Judging by the blue residue there, this thing's got Velcro gaskets in it. The boards are worn, you can see, well I don't know if you can see, there's a gap right down there, I can see the top of the ring, so it's obviously got wear. What I'm interested in though, is whether or not it's been bored, and I'm really hoping it hasn't. I'm just hoping it was freshened up with new rings, because if this is a virgin bore, it could be a really, really good core. So I'm just going to pop the gasket off and wind the engine to get a piston on the top and give it a bit of a clean off and see what I can find. But essentially it's been really neglected. The cooling system's been terribly neglected. Look at that rust stalactite or whatever it's called. Oh, that's sealer. That's elastic. That's not good. That's blocked up the whole. That's blocked up the gallery, which is stupid. So someone made a daft mistake. I'm hoping I can use this. If I can use this, I'll be stoked. Well, this is a bit odd because this head is much easier to undo. I mean, I've got a better angle here, but the other side was really difficult. So this one's been off, I reckon, since it was overhauled. But this is the side I'm interested in, because I think that I think the knock was coming from around number 4. So I'd be very interested to see if I can sort of see anything obvious there. Well, just as I assumed, we've got a blue Velcro on this side and a red one on that side. I don't know what sort that is. I've not come across one, but there is traces of a blue one there. So this head's been taken off at some time in the past. And so what we need to do now is do some scrapings. Clean one of these pistons up on the top and see if it's been bored. Judging by this, it hasn't been bored. That looks all original. Even the little one there. I just can't see if this is in focus. Even that little one there is factory. And the best bit is, it's a stock bore. That's not the right way to measure it with a vernier, but it'll give you an indication. So, there seems to be even absolutely no lip. None. I can't feel a damn thing there. And so boring that would be a heck of a shame. If it's still alright. Now I've got to go and get it measured properly. But I reckon that would be really, really a terrible shame to bore it. I'll have a look. There's carbon all around the tops of the bores. But it means if we're going to stroke it, it needs to be bored. Because of the piston travel is going to be different, so we need to think about that. I'm taking the sump off, and I'm doing it a rather unconventional way. I'm sort of doing it this way up, so that if there's any sludge in there at the bottom, which there's bound to be, I don't want it sort of pouring back into the block. So I'm going to lower the sump and and just have a look inside. Then I can sort of flip the engine over and have a good look at the crank and what's going on there. Oh, she's got crap in there. Let's have a look. I think a bit of fuel's got in here too. It smells of petrol in there. Well, it hasn't got a baffle in it. That was one of the things I was looking for. Alright, let's find out if this thing's got a dirty little secret. Let's try and see what the heck's making all that noise. Yeah. Something is really wrong with it because it made a horrendous noise. I should have done this outside. Why didn't I do it outside? Right, so here's our little telltale 302 marking there. I'm just going to I'm looking for any movement I can see. It sounded like it had a spun bearing down on number 4. Hang on. Oh no, that's just where it's turning. Well, what the heck was that noise, I wonder? Let's pop a bearing cap off and see if we can see anything underneath. It sounded like 4, but I could well be wrong. I don't know. It needs to really be pulled down to see what it could have been. I'm just curious. Hasn't spun, but I did drop it. I just don't know what caused the knock. It was horrendous. Well, even the bearing looks pretty good, although it hasn't lost its white metal part, but it looks like it's starting to shale in this area here, so you wouldn't put it back together with those bearings. You'd always put new ones on. But I just want to see what the bearing is. It's standard FM, so it's a Federal Mogul bearing, standard size. So it has been rebuilt, but it's a re-ringer, just rings and bearings by the look of it. But I can't see what's causing the knock. But all I can see is really, really good news. It's incredible that it's this good. Well, the rings are all free, they're not seized in the lands at all. These two things are lined up, which is stupid. But, you know, one of them looks very good anyway. The camshaft's got all sorts of pitting on it, so it probably doesn't run in properly. But we'll just keep going for the moment. So I'm still pulling this little 302 apart, and some of the things I don't like how they're assembled. The first is the fact that some of the rings are lined up. The gaps in it are lined up. So far I've only got 4 out, but none of them had any damage to the pistons or anything. And the other thing I don't like is the fact that the oil pump drive just drops straight in, and there's supposed to be a circlip just under where the distributor mounts to stop that sort of thing from happening. So, you know, there are bits and pieces that are a little bit dodgy about it, but on the whole, it's really, really good. This is actually in some ways better than the 351 I pulled down. I just don't know what that knock was. I really don't. I can't see anything, or at least there's nothing immediately obvious that it could have been. Still pulling our little 302 apart. It all looks really, really good. The bores are fantastic. There is some wear down the bottom where the rings have sort of stopped on the downward part of the straight to come back. And I've just noticed a bit of a mistake from the previous builder. And that's that he's put that collar on the wrong end. He had it at the oil pump end. That has to be set up with a certain amount of clearance for the shaft to move, so it can't come out when you pull the dizzy out, because they do get stuck from time to time. But that was a careless mistake. So we'll keep going. And the crankshaft looks to be in absolutely lovely condition. It's not perfect, but given the age of it and so forth, it's pretty good. There's the bearings. They've still got the white metal on them. A little bit pitted there. That could be water damage. Not really sure what that is, but when they get like that, they can quite often start shaling. So it's a good time to pull it apart. Just popping these Welsh plugs out, and you can see the extent to which they've leaked. sort of all dribbled down here, and it started to leak worse actually since I started the car, or since I started the engine originally, and they're just chewed out, they're absolutely gone. So I'm trying to take them out and flick them around to get them out. They've not been that cooperative. Whoops. Normally you can sort of hit them on the inside and flick them over, but these ones tend to sort of bury themselves like that, and they're quite tricky to get out. But the reason that I can't flick them over doing this way on the inside, because you can normally flick them over like a coin and pop them out, is your screwdriver just seems to go right through them, but you can still sort of grab them and yank them out. But there's all sorts of scaly rot inside. I mean, it's never had the cooling system looked after, so I might run a pressure washer through it all to try and drain it out through the bottom before it gets hot tanked. Eventually I'll take it in and get it all looked at. But yeah, it's just a bloody mess. So them's the brakes with old engines. It's got a lot of good things going for it. There you go, that one flicked around. It's got a lot of good things going for it, but it's also got a lot of neglect that's evident. So I mean, it's probably a long time since it was in its XB Falcon, but whatever the case, it is in need of some work. So I'll just pull this crankshaft down now. Whoops. There's too many hazards in here on the floor. There we go. And we'll get a light and we'll have a look at these bores. I am pretty impressed with it though. It does look really, really good. Okay, this is turning out to be a bit challenging. Here we go. And it's coming out now. Nice and easy, does it? And the journal's nice and clean, but the lobes are pitted. Some of them look like they've lost their hardening. On the side there you can see that, that's all gone. And I can measure this, see that, that's shot. And so we can measure that and work out, oh look at that, its lift, or its base circle, its lift, sorry, with its base circle subtracted, so we can work out the lift and that sort of stuff. Now buying junkyard engines is something quite hazardous in terms of you don't always know what you're getting, and so it's best to purchase them in disassembled state, some sort of disassembled state, because then you can really see. And the problem with that is that most of them have been sitting around and they're rusty, and so you can't really see. But newly disassembled ones through some importers and that sort of stuff are a pretty good way to go. Now the hazard is buying a runner, a second-hand runner, because people are reluctant to pull them apart then because they're a running thing, and of course you have no idea what you're getting, so you don't know. Even though it runs quite well, and V8s can be very, very thick, and it's not immediately obvious because they will maintain a fairly good idle and that sort of thing, and so you don't really know what you're getting. And another thing is you don't know, because they're 40 years old or so, if they're already maxed out at 60,000. So right, there's somebody using a brush cutter, which is annoying, but at the end of the day I'm looking at this from the bottom, sort of looking up toward the bores, and it looks to be in absolutely brilliant condition. In fact, that ring up the top, that ridge up the top, is carbon. I can't feel a ridge with my fingers, but I can feel where the rings have stopped at the base of their stroke and the pistons change direction. I can feel that, which means it needs to be rebored. Now at the end of the day, this engine is honeable and reusable with cast rings. Cast rings always been in better on an old bore, but I'm not going to do that. The purpose of using this engine is to preserve it, and I think it'll last better if it's bored 20,000s and molly rings are fitted, because that way they're going to be kinder to the bore, and I think it'll, as I said, last a lot longer. Now although this looks to be a tremendous core, there are a few things I need to do beforehand. And the first is to run the engine number through the PPSR, which is the Personal Property Securities Register, to make sure that any vehicle this has been in hasn't been stolen and hasn't been reported. Now although the seller gave me a receipt with it, if it's been knocked off, it's no good. I can't use it. So after that I'll take it to the machine shop. I'm about to pick up my 351 engine, and when I pick that up I'll take this down and I'll get them to hot tank it and crack test it, and that way I'll know unequivocally if it's a good core. And I'm really hoping it is, because so far it looks absolutely brilliant. Now virgin bore Cleveland blocks are extremely difficult to find, and most of the ones that are advertised are around 600 bucks. Now given that they go to normally about 60,000 in terms of rebuilding room, it's very unusual to find one like that. And it never ceases to amaze me that people, particularly in the 80s with the 186 Holden engines, used a maximum at 60 thousandths to make 192s. And a lot of engines, whether they be 186Ss or 186X2 blocks, were wasted in that regard. So boring isn't something I want to do or something I take lightly, particularly with something that's as good as this. But I think it's the best opportunity for it to increase its longevity and also give it a lot more in terms of rebuilding room and life sort of on from here. Now, bored out and rebuilt properly, this is going to be good for another 40 years. Given that the car it's going into will be lucky to do 1,000 or 2,000 kilometres a year, so it stands to last an awfully long time, and the next 40 will probably be a lot easier on it. So these sorts of things, if they're in this condition, are best left. I'm not going to stroke. I'm only going to stroke to 351. I'm not going higher than that. I don't want to put it under any more stress. It will be fairly stock in terms of it'll have increased compression. I'll use the 302 heads, which will give it probably around 10.5 to 1 with a mild camshaft and a tricked out carby and regraphed ignition. But aside from that, it'll be in standard condition, so it should last an awfully long time and should make around 320 horsepower. Now when it comes time to rebuild it, I'm not going to film it because I will have already done a rebuild on the Windsor and also one on the Cleveland, which is going in the XC. But I will do a video on this going in the XD. Now, the XD's engine needs to come out because I want to replace the steering box. It's got a leak in it, the coupling. I want to change all the brake lines, the steel and the rubber brake lines, and also get a reconditioned booster for it. And swap the engines over. So I plan to have that car off the road for about a fortnight or so, and that comes after the XC. And of course I've got to also do that little Toyota over there. There's quite a bit more to do between family commitments, work commitments and recreation. So I'm just going around, just removing junk from in here. The hot tank will do that, but at the end of the day, if I can get rid of the most of it just with a magnet and give it a good blast with a pressure washer, it might make just a better result overall. There's a lot of muck in there. Well, there is something a little bit concerning. It looks like there's a crack down here, but I think it's when it was cast, it seems to stick out. I don't actually know what that is, but it looks like a crack, but actually it protrudes. So it might be alright. Somebody might be able to shed a bit of light on that. But I'll turn the engine over. On the flip side of it, which is sort of under here, underneath that cam plug, which you can't see from here. I'll try and see. Anyway, when the light's a bit better, I'll show you. There's nothing showing down here, which is the other side of it. So it might not be anything to be worried about. I'm not sure. I need to show the engine builder. Just pulling these main bearing shells out, and they look to be in lovely condition. But what's even more surprising is they're original, and I don't think for a moment you're going to be able to see with this camera because this camera's rubbish, but it says Ford DOAE 6333 April 1973. So I'm the first one to take these bearings out since the technicians at Ford put them in. What do you reckon, Claire? So I think it's quite incredible that these were put in, and look at the white metal's all still there. These were put in when I was in first grade in primary school back in 1973, and of course I'm 50 this year. I'm 50 in a couple of months, so they've stood up the test of time very well, although on the centre thrust bearing they've started to come apart. And this is the problem with resurrecting old engines. The look at this chunk's coming off now. Look, the trouble with resurrecting old engines is you do get bearing failure that's sort of imminent, if you know what I mean. So the thing will run for a while if it's been sitting there, but then particles of the bearing material can adhere to the crank and chew the whole thing out if it's been sitting for too long, and they call that adhesive wear. So I don't know what the story with this is, but that I just peeled that off with my finger. That could be quite a catastrophic bearing failure in an engine that could otherwise be deemed as healthy. And of course the last thing we do, we need to get these gallery plugs out. There's 5 of them, and what I found fits very well is an 8mm snap-on tool. It's very, very snug, and it sort of allows you to get these out. Now these can be horrendously difficult to get out, but this makes very light work of it. And I've had a 429 that even the machine shop had difficulty getting those out, so this makes very, very easy work of it. And of course when we seal these, as the engine builders recommended liquid Teflon to seal these, not Teflon tape or GM seal or anything like that. So we'll get it in there and take them out, and that way of course when it comes back after machining, we can run the brushes through the galleries with brake clean and really clean them out properly. But they're quite easy to remove if you've got the right tool for it. And of course here's another view of that crack, and I don't think it is a crack, it's raised. I think it's a casting imperfection, but whatever the case I will get a second opinion on it. At the end of the day, that's it for this episode, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I will make a few more on this series. Did intend to stop at 3, but it looks like we've kept going because there's a bit more information to disseminate. Anyway, take care. See you later. Ta-da.